played Pathologic 2, which is a remaster, sequel, prequel, remaster of the original Pathologic Classic HD, which is a remaster of the original Pathologic 1. And like, see, we're already 3 layers deep, and we haven't even talked about the narrative yet. Like, for fuck's sakes. The game starts at the end, or at the start, or maybe the end of Pathologic 1, or maybe Pathologic 2, or maybe it's the HD Classic Remaster. It doesn't really matter what it is. You just lost the game and you get a second chance at all, basically. And that's a hell of a first impression. And that's excluding stuff like kids playing hopscotch next to a bonfire, and a soldier, bird people, this guy, an execution. The atmosphere is almost palpable, but we'll talk more about that later. And you may be wondering, as this is a weird game in a series of games full of weird, do you have to play the previous weird game to understand this weird game? And not really. The previous game is mentioned from time to time, but it's references only. And they are largely dismissible as meta commentary that you don't need to understand, and are thus up to interpretation, so it's not really all that important to have a knowledge of the original. But I could see how it could make the transition into the game a bit more simple. It could also just really hinder the overall experience, as you're not learning anything. You're effectively just retreading old ground, and this game is effectively learning stuff for 20 hours. That being said, that doesn't mean this game is entirely the same. The narrative is different, characters are different, and gameplay mechanics are different. The references to the original game are, more along the lines of meta commentary on how the first game ended, depending on the ending the developers think is canon and stuff like that. But I won't get into that, because other people have done that, and most of them have talked about the game for well over an hour, and knowing my creative tendencies, I could do a lot longer than that, so I'm just not even gonna fucking talk about it. We'll just go to the premise now, okay? We play as a surgeon called Artemy. We have just returned from the big city, having received a letter from our father, the current doctor for our hometown. The letter was pretty urgent, but we received it late, so we illegally get on a train to the town, but when we pull into the station, we get jumped by 5 people who want to kill us for some reason, but because we're a total Chad, we kill 3 of them and 2 of them run off. That's cool, but it becomes pretty quickly apparent why Artemy had to go to the big city to study medicine. This town's fucking weird. Even ignoring the tri-homicide at the local train station, something which personally I'm not all that dissimilar with, to be perfectly honest, plus the weird local kids that dress up as dogs. The town is unnamed, it's in some part of the world, we just know we're next to a river of some sort. Or in some time period. The game never really gives us clues, at least not clues that are dismissed by other clues. I mean, there's a fuck-off glass tower on the outskirts of town, strange creatures that want to use toenails as a currency to run a taxi service. The townfolk vary from yak milk farmers to industrialists that want to invent, steam power, and heaps of weird-looking fucks, like this guy or that guy. The town doesn't make sense. So it's good that our main character Artemy also has no clue what's going on, so we have to learn it together. It's like wandering into a random town in the country you've never been to and trying to do a weekly shop. But since this is a game, it's not that simple. Our dad has been murdered by what people seem to think is a local cryptid that also brings with it the plague or something. So we have to solve his murder and the plague. Yeah, alright, that sounds like a fucking walk in the park. Let's talk about presentation now, let's talk about the visuals. On a technical level, the game looks good. The town is impressively realistic. A strong use of lighting really makes the town feel livable. Every nook or cranny is packed with detail and props, barrels, cabinets, whatever. It looks good, feels good, and it is just good, frankly. But it would be easy to dismiss the town as basic. It is, after all, a bunch of vaguely European buildings in what is predominantly a very Eastern European setting. But that is dismissing the other side of the equation. This town is not normal. It is not just the local Woolworths and the Caltex down the road, it's also giant, looming megastructures. The weird glass tower on the edge of town, the strange broken down buildings which act as staircases up. Up to what? The game never explicitly states. We have a large cathedral that's just not used, and a giant fuck-off abattoir in the adjacent worker housing, both of which look like an ant hive, which might be the case. The town featured in Pathologic 2 is a merger of two cultures, a distinctively European one where they read books and drink fine wine, and a more tribal one focused around spiritualism and animal worship, and they perform these strange rituals in the middle of the night. But they don't exist separately. They kind of exist together as a strange cross-study of both. You'll have this nice, upper-class house, but then there'll be tribal writing on a painting or something. It's interesting, the art and culture of both exist together or separately depending on how you read into it. Which makes sense when they've lived together for generations, so why wouldn't they have shared spaces, interests, and culture? And then you add on the game's strong theatrical styling. This game is effectively a theatre play. That's kind of part of the meta-narrative, which again we'll get into later, but for now, we have spotlights being used to highlight important items. We have characters who dress like tragedians, I don't know. They dress like that. They dress like the weird mannequin things. It's kind of a link back to the whole theatre of cruelty stuff, which again, I'll talk about later. But seeing as nearly, a large amount of this game's side content takes place in a theatre that only shows at night and also predicts the future, this game has no shortage of strange, surrealist visions, horror sequences, or just weird stuff in general. The atmosphere in town is just great. It's spooky, welcoming, and apocalyptic all at once. It's all interesting and thought-provoking, but it really just adds depth to an already stellar-looking game. I can always appreciate good visual design and, unique visual design, and for all intents and purposes, this game is up there with Dishonored and McGee's Alice for me, which is, in case you're new to the channel, really, really good. But the visuals are only one half of the presentation. What about the sound and audio design overall? Well, it's a bit like the visuals, it is a bit weird at times. I want to start with the one that was the most staggering to me. Dialogue is not voiced, but the characters, most of the time, will say stuff when you talk to them.
To climb out of the pot, you'll have to burn your hands.
But it's like a separate line. It's said and delivered in a very theatrical way. It's over the top and whatnot, but how does it relate, if at all?
Can you believe this place? They don't even have a hospital here.
I don't know. It bothers me that the game isn't, somewhat voiced, but the thing is, that is expensive. And these strange lines, while strange and often unconnected.
There once was a man of great humor, who found he was dead of a tumor. But he woke up today to his neighbor's dismay, and that of his cow once he took her.
They can be read into, and they also have excellent delivery.
I'm too old. Nothing can harm me anymore.
Even if we all perish, the town must survive. It's unique.
Weird that you're still alive.
In fact, all of the voice lines in this game sound fucking great.
My dear son, Artemy, I write to you after so many years apart.
I can work miracles. I just lay hands on a person and they... if they had cancer or a tumor or something in the blood.
Kidding. People like him only care about themselves. They can't connect things. They certainly can't sew anything.
There he is. Look. He came to watch.
The other thing that is also really, really great is the music. It's tribal, it's full of chanting drums and sitars. It feels ancient and warm, but yet uninviting, like we weren't meant to hear it. It's all very grounded in the setting. It is, again, a mixture of two cultures. But it's clear that in this instance, the influence from the tribal kin has won. Maybe because they are the more artsy of the two cultures, or simply because their music sounded more mysterious for the game. I don't know, but the game has some strange tracks as well. Some of them are downright creepy.
My blood is getting thicker.
Just feel quiet, Owls. You can hear the rats in the walls.
I'm fraying at the
Shall I sing you a song?
Overall, the rest of the soundscape is perfectly good. The overall mixing and levels of the sound is good. Nothing sounds too loud or quiet. Quality is good across the board, and general sounds you would encounter during gameplay are suitable and fine. But in terms of presentation as a whole, the game is good, but there are some bad points. Animations can be really janky, almost popping in and out of different animations. Characters can slide during combat. Some animations for the player in combat are really weird. Some dialogue from NPCs in the street can also be a bit weird. Like, it's almost like they weren't recorded in the same location as other NPCs, so they sound like they're communicating across space and time. All of these problems stop the game from being a good looking and sounding game, but you do slowly accept them as features of the world and you do forget about them, but it is worth bringing up here anyway. The tutorial is a bunch of seemingly disconnected vignettes of our character doing various things along their train journey to the town. We walk into a house full of random characters turning into tragedians, and then a bird tells us not to waste our time giving this girl water, but we do it anyway. We get water from a barrel outside, put it into one of our empty bottles and give it to the girl, and that was basically a tutorial on how to get water. That was its sole purpose, as long as it, it also set the style and tone excellently as well. We later get a combat tutorial where we have to prove that our heart is good by punching the fuck out of this step man. We left click to attack, hold left click for a stun attack, we can even block with a right click. And if we block, our stamina goes back way faster. So using all of this, we beat him into the ground, and then he says we must trade hearts and become one. So we do, and we literally trade hearts. And that's the combat and training tutorial out of the way. Because that was such a strange way of doing it. But it was good, it was stylish, but that tutorial is just an introduction to mechanics present. So let's talk more about the gameplay loop in a game where you can buy a giant bull for lots of money, literally on day one, and that bull's only purpose is to talk to you in about an in-game week's time. Yeah. This is Pathologic 2, everyone. Well, the general objective of the game is to save the town and to save yourself long enough to save the town. You have needs, and the town has needs. Let's do us first, because we're a little bit less confusing. Well, you have health that you need to not lose, because it's not easy to get it back once it's lost. Because Pathologic has a number of bandages and first aid supplies that would make the Morrison government blush. And by that, I mean there are none. Even the doctors in town, aka you, have no supplies for, pretty much most of the game. Every little scrap of medicine you get is so important because it could be your last for a very long time. So do not get stabbed by cheeky Slavs in the infected district. You need to balance multiple stats like thirst, hunger, exhaustion, and immunity. And well, thirst and hunger are pretty self-descriptive really. Drink and eat or you die. Simple, right? Wrong. The weird thing about being in a town infested with plague is that there's not much food or clean water going around, so there's no trains coming to town, which means the only food in town is getting increasingly expensive and of lesser quality. Aside from some rare canned goods, like canned meat or canned fruit, the only stuff that's being sold is being sold for insane prices that go up with every day. Water, however, is fine for most of the game. It really does get difficult when you realize that as areas get infected, so does the water. Dirty water will make you sick, and that doesn't really help you out. But you can repair the water pumps to make the water clean again. It's expensive, But it soon dawns on you that you cannot possibly repair all of them, and with it being impossible to know which areas will be hit by plague next, it might not be worth the risk. But water is literally needed to survive. Plus, with all the running you're doing, you're going to need heaps of water. But I mean, you could also fast travel, but that costs in-game time and also costs a unique form of currency called fingernails, which, yeah, they're not actually fingernails, but a weird token. Rare and perhaps unneeded if you have the patience of a saint. So you gotta get resourceful. You see this? This is life. Every house has a bin, every house is enterable and has cabinets and shit. You can loot all you want, but watch your reputation with each area. Do not let it get too low or everyone will kill you. It is a balancing act that you have to do and you cannot fuck it up. If you're lucky and you manage to hoard enough random objects, you might just survive long enough to cure the plague. You can trade these little odd bits and bobs to randoms in the street who might like your marbles and maybe trade them in exchange for some apples, or even better, some meat. Trading is based on reputation. A piece of metal might only be worth 3 reputation, but the object you want costs 6, so you have to meet that cost. If you trade over the value of an item, your relationship with that district goes up. Relationship is important because it means less people are going to want to stab you randomly, and stabbing is not fun, obviously, so please trade frequently as it may become your only source of critical stuff in the late game. Oh, and abuse kids. I mean this, trading with kids is stupid profitable. They always have immunity pills on food and they give it away for literal junk, especially as the plague gets worse. Speaking about the plague, did you know that you can get it, and getting it means that it talks to you? Well, you don't want that.
Foeless. Foeless. Why be foes? Why shun? Better to listen than to fight.
So you gotta keep your immunity up by crafting and using various medicines, which I guess brings me to the alchemy part of the game. You can make medicine from plants and people's gooey insides. These boost immunity and can be used to treat the plague in other people. If you can diagnose them with the right meds and then treat them with the medicine that corresponds to where the plague is in their body, you get reputation and someone doesn't have to die. It is a simple system that is, it's easy to understand, but you know what isn't simple? Surviving. You have no idea how many bins I have looked through, how many empty bottles I have filled with barrel water, how many scraps of metal I have traded. This game is rough. The main reason why is actually how time works in the game. Every day is shorter than the last, which means you have less time to do story missions and any side content, plus less time to get food and water for the day, or to get the money which can be used to buy food and water at shops that still take money. The biggest mechanic in this game by far is sprinting. You will be sprinting a lot. You will just be moving a lot around town. No one comes to you in Pathologic. You are doing quests that are far too numerous to ever be done in the tight time frame of the day. You will find yourself constructing routes for the city just so you can do all the quests in a day. It is helpful that the game is friendly enough to provide a map that shows you where quests are, and a mind map that tracks the chain of events for quests and random events. It can help out if you're confused or you've forgotten something, but as everything you do is constantly weighted in your brain with that ever-ticking clock, efficiency actually matters a lot in Pathologic, too. It might be faster to find plants out in the expansive plains, but you have to walk there first. Or you could get plants on your midnight run to the theatre that projects the future. Nearly everything you do has a cost that is tangible. Attacking some guy in combat might net you a quick buck of some food, but if you get stabbed and lose health, you now have less health until you heal yourself. It is brutal, it is a hard game. But because of its difficulty, Pathologic 2 is extremely motivating and engaging. I was never bored, and this game is a lot of the same. It feels depressive and hopeless, because for the most part it is. Why? Well, I haven't talked about the other layer of gameplay yet. Within the town we have a lot of named characters, some big to the plot, some small. Some are interesting and likable characters, but some are straight up RuneScape coal barons. But the thing that ties them all together is the fact that any of them can die at a moment's notice due to the plague, or choices that you make. You can also die due to choices you make, a mistake that will cost you badly. Mark Immortal, the weird god of this universe, might accidentally take away a chunk of your health permanently. Or maybe he'll take away a chunk of your hunger permanently. He's a cruel god and he wants you to know it. But how can you avoid everyone you know dying due to the plague? Well, you gotta treat the disease or you have to cure it. I won't spoil the cure because it's important to the narrative, but you can treat their symptoms and pain with medicine. But this might buy them a day or two, but they will die eventually without the cure, most likely anyway. But the medicine you use on them is the same one you need for yourself. Do you treat your pain or someone else's? That's a decision you have to make time and time again. It is possible for everyone to survive, but it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to min-max every second to do it. And again, quality of life feature is the ability to look up a list of people and you can see who's in danger of being infected or who is infected. And even who has died. It is really handy. It just saves you from having to trek across the entire town, which is the reason I never finished the original game. So that's the gameplay. And it's that time of the day where we talk about narrative, because yes, it is narrative time. And spoilers ahead everyone, I will be spoiling a lot of the reveals in this game, and thus ruining the experience if you intend on playing the game. And now for the story. It's a bit complex, very meta and very in-depth. It is a lot. So please stay with me. And for people who have played the game, I cannot promise that I will include everything. Doing a complete overview of this game is nearly impossible. It is just so dense. Every conversation is several pages long and has various dialogue options. The plot I am talking about is the one I played and the one I experienced. And I'm still generalizing this a lot. Will I come back later and do a complete video? Maybe, if I have a spare year here or there. But let's start off. The game is organised into 11 days that have 11 nights. Each day has its own quests, and quests that are not done are timed out. How is this dealt with in the narrative? I have not the slightest. But let's start at the beginning. Pathologic 2 opens at the end in media res. We talk to a guy named Mark Immortal who tells us about a play where the first run went terribly. But he's given us another go to get it right. It's really nice, that chap. That is obviously like meta commentary on how the first game's events didn't go the way that we wanted as the player. It could even be saying that the reception of the first game wasn't what they wanted, that they wanted another go. The use of theatre is one of the game's repeating motifs, if not the most interesting part of its writing and narrative design. And then we get to talk to big fuck off bird things. It's weird, but it's also telling us that this game is not going to be the average affair. It's going to be a bit more involved on our side. And I mean, I put off playing Disco Elysium until it was fully voiced, so trust me when I say I understand why someone would be put off by this. It is very amateuristic, and it's not polished, but it's charming, and that charm is more important than any amount of jank, repeated texture, or weird audio cue. And this is the part of the game that I already covered. It pops up again, because, we're talking about the narrative. And for sake of clarity, I'm just going to reuse that part of the script, so here we go. We play as a surgeon named Arnie Barrick. We just returned from the big city, having received a letter from our father, the current doctor for our hometown. The letter was very urgent, but we received it very late. So we illegally jump on a train to the town, but when we pull into the station, we get jumped by 5 fucks that have knives. And they want to kill us for some reason. But because we're a Chad, we kill 3 of them and 2 of them run off. But seeing as this is a somewhat functioning town, those 2 fuck off and tell everyone that we're a serial killer. And maybe we also killed Gregory Kane, the father of one of the big families in town. Oh, and our dad, the town leader and spiritual leader of the local natives, the kin. Our dad was someone who had the ability to alter the connections between objects. Like the spiritual connections, I think. It's never really explained. But in the kin culture, and what is seemingly the culture at large in the city, only people like our dad are permitted to cut flesh, living or dead. This is something that we are eventually permitted to do in his place. The first day is spent trying to convince people around the city to take us in, as nearly everyone is out to get us. We go to Bad Grief, a childhood friend who is now at the head of the town's criminal underbelly. He's not too much help, really. We visit the furries, who might help us if we do a mission for them, so we deliver a death threat to another kid and they help us spread the word around that we're alright. We also visit Stark, who was basically our best friend, but we had a falling out when we left the town, so he was kind of mentored by our father in our absence, which makes him believe that he was the son that our dad really wanted. Okay then, kind of a dick move, but whatever. Finally, we visit and stay with Laura, our childhood crush, I think. She lets us sleep at hers for the night, and she also tells us that everyone just tells everyone that, we didn't do any murdering. We murdered 3 people, it was in self-defense, so it's fine. This makes the town indifferent to us, which is a lot better than constantly being stabbed. The town starts to believe that the murder was committed by something called a Shabnak Adra or something. It's basically a local cryptid. They look a lot like the women of the kin who are called herd brides. The Shabnak also breeds the plague with it, fun fact. So a lot of herd brides die in the impending hysteria, with one being burned alive at the stake, a la the witch trials. This is also the day where we learned that there's this weird guy who's totally willing to buy organs off of us, if we have any spare. Okay. On day 2 we go to our father's funeral, but something is very wrong. The Earth won't take him, he keeps being pushed out. The Earth senses that a death is left unfulfilled, so we take it on. This death kind of manifests itself in a list of 8 names. These are 8 kids across the town. Some are poor nobodies, while some are the sons and daughters of the ruling class. We spend the rest of the day tracking down who we can and asking them about our father so that we can figure out what this list is actually for. We also get a letter saying that we need to go talk to the judge about our father's house. So we talk, we get the rights to it, and now we live here. We go and check it out, but something is off here.
I'm freeing at the seams.
Strange sounds and this black cloud in his workshop. It retreats though. Opening this box gives us a letter and a key to a factory building. Outside the house, a doctor from the big city, the Bachelor, tells us this building's under quarantine. He goes inside and asks us what this mold is. It seems to be alive. A crowd of people outside are covered in sores. A couple of them seem to think it's the smoke from the abattoir. It's somehow toxic. Day 3 brings with it the biggest challenge yet. The same plague that nearly killed the town 5 years ago, is back, and it's already killing people in record time. We get a tutorial on how to treat a patient, but I also discovered something else. I already have a cure for it. It's this drug that the kids make. It's deadly to some, but it seems to work if they are infected with plague. The only hassle is no one seems to make it anymore, and it's hard to find. So I hold on to the ones I have though, just in case. A relief fund is set up for doctors in town. Treat patients, get money and food, basically. The plague is in full swing and we have to protect who we can. In terms of narrative events, it kind of gets, really busy from here on out. So I'm going to be general now. Food and water are getting expensive, which means that a lot of the people we talk to are hungry and thirsty. It's quite smart that this also means it's bad for us. We are also hungry and thirsty. I've heard that this game is hard, but it's hard for a reason. If it wasn't so hard to survive, these conversations would have no weight because they wouldn't be our struggle. Just some flavor text in a conversation with an NPC. The next few days are spent trying to find the murderer of our father and trying to find a potential cure for the plague. We learn that we can make medicine by combining plants together. This can lower infection in people and give them immunity, but the real standard is, if we combine them with organs, we can get painkillers. We have to try different combinations as we try to find a cure. Eventually we learn that the bulls slaughtered in the abattoir have a native immunity to the plague, but we can't use it for our advantage as they're too different from humans. So we kind of think, okay, we need to find a mix between a human and a bull, some sort of human-bull hybrid, somehow. A dream vision of one of the children on a list tells us that we need to head to the king's old village and there we will find the answer. This kid, we haven't spoken to them yet, right? We also haven't as of yet found the 8th person on the list. They are simply denoted with a symbol, not a name. The old village has a very strange geyser. It spawns blood, living blood. This can be combined with our homemade medicine to make a cure for the plague, but the problem is, we only just got 2 of them. We only have 2 cures. We need to find where this blood comes from, and we need to find it fast. That leads us to the abattoir, where the practice of draining the bull before butchering has been happening for hundreds of years. This practice has resulted in a massive underground reservoir of blood forming, and this is where it gets really unclear. I don't know why this blood is any different to the blood from another bull. Maybe it's because the kin have done something special to it, as they are the ones who slaughtered the bull, and the kin are also completely unaffected by the plague because, fun fact I guess, the plague is the earth fighting back or something similar. The kin are of the earth and thus are unaffected by it. It only attacks people who are not connected to the earth in some way. Not aliens, mind you, but perhaps people who lack a spiritual connection. We figured this out inside the abattoir, which we knew was going to be a little different than the ones in reality, because from the outside it's a massive mound of dirt with what seems like bones shooting from it. Inside is more like a cave than anything else. It's full of kin who are all doing rituals on something. This is also where a worm asks us to execute our duties as our father's replacement by making something new. So we make a heart which talks to us and tells us about the plague and its function. It also asks us if we want to be connected to the earth, but this will make us a mute for some reason. So I say no, and the heart tells us to jump, so I do, and now we're in a massive pit. Whew. And this is where it gets really weird. It's a fleshy maze down here. Something is very wrong down here. We eventually find a massive heart. This heart is dying, a massive knife is nearly piercing it, which we learn is actually the tip of the polyhedron, that strange tower on the edge of town. A tower whose inhabitants don't get plague. Interesting? And this heart, by the way, is the 8th person on the list, and it's the town. It is the thumping heart of the town, and it's dying. Once outside of the tunnels, Onion, the foreman of the abattoir, confronts us and reveals who our father really is. Our father knowingly infected himself with the plague, and thus jump-started this whole wave of infection. He thought that the plague could rebuild the town and fix the problems currently being faced. He said that it would provide the town with a vaccination. That night, we have a dream where we talk to some strange stick fiends called albinos. They beg us to think of the earth and to think of the future of the kin. They basically state that killing the plague will destroy all of nature's beauty and all the strange creatures that live on it. The plague is not evil, it's just Earth's pain. If we destroy the plague, we destroy the living heart of the earth and all the miracles will cease to be. I assume this means magic, of which the game does have. Not for you, mind you, but some characters can see into the future. We have rats that breach the fabric of time and all sorts. And then our dad pops up, but in dream form, and, well, he's dead, so of course it's a dream. Oh god almighty. He explains to us his grand plan, and really just how stupid his plan is. He wanted to reintroduce the plague into the town to prove the town was strong enough to survive. If the town could cull the weak, maybe it had a future after all. He believes that the town was connected wrong, and by this, he means its fundamental foundation and its connection to the earth and culture at large was wrong. In order to restore this connection, he thought that the plague was needed as it would kill off people and give the town a blank slate. And he tells us no matter what choices we make, he knows they will be the right ones. Thanks, Dad. It makes me really proud to know my dad's a murderer, but that's fine. We wake up, and the visual manifestation of the plague, the executioner, just told us to get fucked and has infected all of the kids we're looking after. And now we need to cure them, and we need to cure them before the day is done. Jesus. Gotta cure 7 people. Yeah, alright, let's do it, okay? I make some cures in my machine and I set out giving them to the kids. They all want to be cured last so that another can be saved. It's really, martyrist of them. But I hoarded everything. So this was like, fairly easy to do. I only lost 1 kid and that was fairly early on, and I think that's because the plague was talking to her. And she willingly submitted herself to the plague. I don't know. I've glossed over a lot of stuff here, but I figured I should at least cover the narrative. Eventually the ending rolls around and we have 2 choices. We get the army to bomb the polyhedron, which releases enough living blood to cure the whole town, or we do nothing and we let the plague win. Only one of these actually sounds bad. But I guess if we get rid of the living blood, the kin will die off, the native people will die. But I still did it, and they all seem to survive in the end anyway. It's just a little sadder is what they are, but that's fine, they're all cunts anyway. And that's Pathologic 2. Yeah. I purposely didn't include much of what happened. This is more so people have a reason to play the game. And also, I knew that people who didn't want to play the game would watch the video just to learn what it's about. Which is fine. I do highly recommend playing the game. It's great. The writing is excellent. It's probably some of the best writing ever in games, honestly. If you've just tuned back in because of the timestamp in the description, welcome to the conclusion. You've avoided most of the narrative spoilers. I can't guarantee there won't be background visual spoilers, but, you know, it is what it is. Pathologic 2 is a very hard game to recommend. It's never going to be everyone's cup of tea. It's a very logical game and one that requires your attention to get the most out of it. Very few games these days require you to read pages and pages of dialogue, most of which doesn't directly relate to the plot, but it rather serves as world or character building. But the thing is, the writing is supremely underrated. This is some of the best in the industry. It is up there with Disco Elysium, honestly. Actually, in saying that, if you like Disco Elysium, you'll probably like Pathologic. But what about for everyone else? As I've said, this game is hard. It is a game about planning. You always get hints on what's going to happen, but it's never rock solid. The theatre at midnight is brilliant, as it might tell you what the next day will bring and thus what you need to prepare for. There's a lot of stuff like that. It is a game where you have to think. It is surreal. It's very meta at times. Which means that this is a game where you have to read and you have to analyze everything. Which for some people, and I do understand why, it can be very off-putting. But, I don't know, I'm really glad I played this game. It's just interesting for a lot of reasons. It's not fun most of the time, but it's not a bad time. It's a very tense experience with some really good characters and set pieces. So I highly recommend it. Plus, you can always just give it a go and refund it if you don't like it. The game is also technically not done yet. It's not early access, but there is meant to be 3 characters you can play as with their own campaigns. But so far we only really have 1, so will we be getting the others? I kinda doubt it. Pathologic 2 did not sell well, so do they even have the money for it? I don't know. But the thing is, the base game as it stands is 20 or so hours, and it is a complete experience, but it might be more complete in the future. I for one hope so. This game is a masterpiece, frankly. So, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. If you have suggestions, I would love to hear them.